Welcome to the second mini lecture for chapter 17. Now we're going to talk about drying of the grain, and we'll look at a little bit about silage and forages and how we harvest those, and we'll talk a lot more in class and do some pretty fun activities with that as well. So we market this grain by certain bushel weight and then moisture. So when you take the grain in to get sold or to get stored, there will be a couple of those, there'll be a couple people that will test a couple different things. So they'll test for toxins, they'll test the moisture. If that moisture is way too much, they will send you back, or if it has toxins, they'll actually make you pour it there. So there's a lot of different factors that go into selling that grain, especially when it's going into storage or going into storage at another co-op. Same kind of thing when you're looking at storage for yourself. If you have your own grain bins, you should be doing that too. So testing your moisture so mold doesn't occur, so toxins don't occur. So we have two ways that we can reduce that moisture. We have field drying. That's not going to take a lot of energy on our part. You know, we're not trying to put dryers in it and after that grain has been harvested. But if we don't get it harvested at the right time, it could lower that moisture too much, and then we have some crop loss. With that artificial drying, it's going to have a greater cost, so you're going to have to put dryers on your grain bins, dryers everywhere, really, and then that's going to have but it's going to have a good high value crop, so you're going to be able to harvest when you can harvest, when you want to harvest. So field drying, that kind of requires you're kind of at God's mercy there, because you have to harvest when it's dry enough, when it's not going to rain, when it's going to, it's kind of up to how much money you want to spend and how much when you want to get that crop out of the field. So grain storage, two main goals that you should have with grain storage: have to have the quality, so it has to have the purity, has to have the color, and the viability if it is to be used for planting. So if we are going to use it, and how we're going to use it, we have to make sure that it's good. So if we're going to store a seed, this is not having to do with harvesting, but if we buy seed and we're going to store it over winter, we have to make sure that we're storing it in the correct way. So temperature, the storage time, the moisture, we have to make sure that funguses aren't present after we harvest, because that could cause a huge loss. Insects, mice, any rodents are going to be a big aspect of that as well. So really important to know and have a very clean and safe way to store not only grain that you've just harvested, but seed that you've bought to plant the next year. All right, harvesting forages. I'm sure if you grew up on any sort of rural America, part of rural America, this was probably one of your first jobs, harvesting forages, whether that's mowing, baling, moving hay, whatever that was. So what is it? So we're just harvesting that vegetative portion of a plant so that we can feed it to livestock. Not necessarily right in the summer, but saving it for the winter months. So we look at this for grazing livestock, look at this for specialty livestock too, horses, goats, a lot of other different animals that will eat hay or silage as well. So we first have to pick what we're going to use it for. Are we going to use it for hay, or are we going to use it for silage? Then we have to figure out how we're going to store it as well. So usually doesn't contain a maturity of a seed, because we're going to hopefully get a couple cuttings off of it, depending where you are in the United States. Whole goal is to make sure we're maximizing the nutrients in that forage. So we want to cut that forage so that it has all of the nutrients that animal will need throughout the entire year, not just the summer, but the entire year. All right, forage yield. We're going to look at some numbers here too in the southern and northern parts of the United States. So this is going to vary. The crop yields will vary really field to field, to be honest with you. So we measure it in tons per acre. So a little different in how we look at it for crops in the field. So tons per acre is how we're going to look and measure this. So in the northern parts of the area, northern parts of the United States, hay yields can be anywhere from 3 to 6 tons per acre per year. In the southern parts of the United States, forage yields can be 8 to 10 tons per acre per year. And again, that's with really good fertilization. That's with really good spray. You know, that's being maintained and managed very, very intense. Corn and silage yields, they can be anywhere from 20 to 30 tons per acre per year. And again, that's for some different types of agricultural production systems that we'll look at a little bit more in class. All right, quality. Now let's look at quality. Very important. We talked a little bit about a couple slides ago. We are harvesting this forage for the nutrients. So it's not going to be to seed. It's going to forage, or we're going to harvest it for the quality and for the nutrients in there. So what are those three main components? Make sure you know this. It's the intake, the nutrition value, and the anti-quality factors, okay? So here are what those mean. Intake, how much that animal is going to eat. Is it palatable? Are they going to eat too much? Are they going to eat too little? How much do we think that they will intake? The nutrition value, nutritive value, just the content of those nutrients. Mainly we're looking at protein and energy, and then we'll look at the micronutrients as well a little bit. And then the anti-quality factors like toxins, just different weeds, things that we think that will decrease that animal's performance. So how do we figure out when we're ready to harvest forages? The whole, some people will argue this, but we have to make sure that we have two goals in mind: the yield and the quality. So if that yield and that quality don't meet up, or they only meet up like once a year, so you're only getting once of a cutting, then in some cases you have to be okay with that. Unfortunately, some aren't okay with that, and they will maybe overgraze and undergraze and cut too quick, cut too soon, and not have that quality of a forage. So we cut that forage when that vegetative to flowering stage is there, so then that yield will increase, so that it will grow back a little bit quicker, so then hopefully we can get a second cutting. And then, producers, they'll use their own kind of indicators as to when they're gonna harvest forages, and they'll measure the rain every day. They will measure what the weather is every day. We have a whole calculation of how we figure out when we're going to cut, when we're going to bale. Every farmer has their own way of doing it, and no one is wrong, because every farmer knows their own land. So really important to once you have a plan, to stick with that plan and not be discouraged if it's not not your neighbors, or not the way you did it with your grandpa. So that's all about when to harvest forage. All right, so here's alfalfa maturity on a yield and digestibility. If you take feeds and feeding with Zeb, or if you'll take it with Taylor this fall, then you will talk about this. So on the left there is your dry matter yield, and then on the right is the percent of vitro digestibility in that dry matter. So we're going from the vegetative to the post-flower. So the maturity level, so the forage yield, forage digestibility, the stem yield, and the stem leaf. So these lines are kind of all over the place here. So you have to pick and choose what type of yield you want as to what type of stem yield you want. And all of those have different nutrients in what they are, what you're going to harvest. So a really good way to know this is to send in tissue samples. It'll take a week to get back. They'll tell you exactly how much is in it, what nutrients in it, micro and macro, and you can hopefully base your decision on a little bit more science as well. All right, so here is a baler. We're baling up some hay right here. This is a round baler.